In a small, quaint village nestled in a green valley, there lived a man named Joseph and his wife, Esther. Their life seemed idyllic, with rolling hills, colorful meadows, and a serene river flowing gently nearby. But beneath this peaceful exterior lay a story full of frustration and unexpected twists. Esther was known throughout the village as a contrary woman. Her neighbors often whispered about her obstinance and how she seemed to delight in doing the exact opposite of what she was asked. This trait made life with her both challenging and unpredictable for her husband, Joseph, who was a patient and hardworking farmer. From the day they married, Joseph quickly learned that Esther had her own way of doing things. One bright morning, Joseph, knowing he had a long day ahead in the fields, asked Esther to bring his lunch at noon. Noon came and went, but Esther was nowhere to be seen. Finally, as the sun began its descent, Esther arrived with his lunch. "Esther, I asked you to bring my lunch at noon, not sunset," Joseph said with a sigh. "But Joseph," she replied with a smirk, "I thought it would be better to bring it later when you would be hungrier." This pattern continued in countless ways. If Joseph asked for water, she would bring wine. If he wanted bread, she would bake a cake. The villagers found these stories amusing, but for Joseph, it was a constant source of exasperation. One chilly autumn day, Joseph decided to outsmart Esther. He had spent the previous night devising a plan to finally get exactly what he wanted. That morning, as he prepared to head to the fields, he turned to Esther with a sly smile. "Esther, please do not bring me any stuffed chicken or pancakes today. They are definitely not the kind of food I want to eat while working in the field," he said, his eyes twinkling with anticipation. Esther paused, her contrary nature kicking in. She tilted her head and narrowed her eyes at Joseph, sensing a trick. But she couldn't resist. Just as he had hoped, she decided to do the opposite of what he said. When noon arrived, Esther appeared at the field, carrying a basket filled with stuffed chicken and pancakes. Joseph couldn't help but chuckle as he enjoyed his delicious meal. The villagers soon noticed a change in Joseph's demeanor. He seemed less frustrated, and more often than not, he wore a knowing smile. It didn't take long for the word to spread that Joseph had found a clever way to handle Esther's contrary nature. However, Esther's stubbornness reached its peak one fateful day. Joseph had been working tirelessly in the field, preparing for the harvest. He had dug a deep pit at the far end of the field to catch rainwater for the dry season. As he settled down for his lunch break, Esther arrived with his meal, as she had started doing regularly, albeit at unpredictable times. "Esther, whatever you do not go near that pit," Joseph warned, his voice filled with genuine concern. But Esther, true to form, couldn't resist. She slowly inched closer to the pit, her curiosity piqued by the stern warning. Joseph watched anxiously as she approached the edge. "Wife, please step away from the pit. It's dangerous," he pleaded. Esther ignored his plea and took another step forward. Just as she peered over the edge, the ground beneath her feet crumbled. With a gasp, she tumbled into the pit, her shriek echoing through the field. Joseph rushed to the edge, his heart pounding in his chest. "Esther, are you all right?" he called down, his voice trembling with fear. "I'm fine," she replied, though her voice was shaky. "But I can't climb out. The sides are too steep." Joseph was torn. He wanted to help her, but a part of him wondered if this was the lesson she needed. After a moment's hesitation, he decided to leave her there for a while. Perhaps the time spent in the pit would make her rethink her contrary ways. As the sun began to set, Joseph returned home for supper. The house felt eerily quiet without Esther's usual bustling. Despite their daily clashes, he missed her presence. As he sat at the table, picking at his meal, his mind raced with thoughts of her stuck in the pit, cold and alone. Esther, meanwhile, sat at the bottom of the pit, her pride wounded and her body shivering in the cool evening air. She tried several times to climb out, but each attempt left her more exhausted and frustrated. In a moment of desperation, she muttered to herself, "I would even thank the devil if he got me out of here." No sooner had she spoken than a puff of smoke filled the pit, and there, standing before her, was the devil himself. His eyes gleamed with a mischievous light as he bowed theatrically. "You called?" he said with a grin. Esther's eyes widened in shock, but she quickly composed herself. "Yes, I did. Can you help me out of here?" The devil chuckled. "Of course, my dear. Climb onto my back, and I'll have you out in no time." Esther hesitated, but then decided she had no other option. She climbed onto the devil's back, and with a powerful leap, he brought her to the surface. But as soon as they were out, he demanded, "Now, get off my back." "No, I will not," Esther replied stubbornly. The devil, taken aback by her defiance, began to run wildly across the field, trying to shake her off. But Esther held on tightly, her grip unwavering. Hours passed, and the devil, exhausted and desperate, saw a soldier riding by. "Good sir," the devil called out, "if you can get this woman off my back, I will make you king." The soldier, intrigued, dismounted and approached. "Ma'am, you must get off his back," he said firmly. "No, I will not," Esther retorted. The soldier drew his sword and threatened, "If you don't get off, I will have to cut you down." "No, I will not," she repeated, her voice steady. Frustrated, the soldier finally said, "Then stay on his back forever." Esther, realizing she had won, shouted, "No, I will not," and leapt off the devil's back. The devil vanished in a puff of smoke, and the soldier rode away, shaking his head in disbelief. Esther stood alone in the field, the stars beginning to twinkle above her. She dusted herself off and began the walk back home, pondering the day's events. Meanwhile, Joseph sat by the fire, his thoughts a whirlwind of worry and love. Every village has its peculiar stories, but none were as curious as the tale of Joseph and Esther. People often laughed and whispered about how contrary Esther was, how she would do the exact opposite of what anyone asked. But for Joseph, it was a daily struggle that tested his patience and creativity. One bright summer morning, Joseph was in the fields, his brow furrowed with thought. He knew that if he asked Esther to bring lunch at noon, she would surely arrive at sunset. If he requested a simple meal, she might bring a lavish feast, or worse, nothing at all. The frustration gnawed at him, but he loved Esther deeply and was determined to find a way to coexist peacefully. As he worked, an idea began to form in his mind. Perhaps, he mused, the key was to outwit Esther's contrary nature. What if he asked for the opposite of what he actually wanted? His heart raced with a mixture of hope and anxiety. It was worth a try. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Joseph returned home with a plan. He found Esther in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared their supper. The familiar sight filled him with a warmth that bolstered his resolve. "Esther," he began, trying to keep his voice steady. "Tomorrow, please don't bring me any food to the field. I will manage without lunch." Esther paused, her eyes narrowing slightly as she looked at him. Joseph's heart pounded in his chest. He could almost see the gears turning in her mind. "We'll see about that," she replied with a mischievous glint in her eye. The next day, Joseph worked with renewed energy, hoping his plan would succeed. As the clock approached noon, his stomach rumbled with hunger, but he kept working, stealing glances toward the path leading to their house. Just as he was beginning to lose hope, he saw Esther approaching, carrying a basket. His heart leapt with joy. When she reached him, she placed the basket down and opened it to reveal a delicious meal of bread, cheese, and fresh fruit. Joseph's eyes sparkled with gratitude and relief. "I thought you might need some food," Esther said, trying to sound indifferent. But Joseph could see a hint of pride in her eyes. "Thank you, Esther," he said softly, taking her hand and giving it a gentle squeeze. She smiled, and for a moment, they shared a rare moment of understanding. Encouraged by his success, Joseph decided to continue with his reverse requests. The next week, he needed some firewood chopped and stacked, a task he usually dreaded asking Esther to do because she would often scatter the logs haphazardly. One morning, he casually mentioned, "Esther, please don't bother chopping any firewood today. I'll do it myself." Esther glanced at him with a raised eyebrow but said nothing. Later that day, When Joseph returned from the fields, he found the firewood neatly chopped and stacked by the fireplace. He felt a surge of joy and marveled at his cleverness. Day by day, Joseph continued this strategy, carefully phrasing his requests in reverse. Each time, Esther would do exactly what he truly wanted, believing she was defying his wishes. It was a delicate dance, but one that brought an unexpected harmony to their lives. One particularly cold winter's day, Joseph felt the chill seeping into his bones as he worked in the barn. He longed for a hot, hearty stew to warm him up, but knew better than to ask directly. Instead, he called out to Esther, who was tending to the chickens. "Esther, please don't make any stew today. We don't need it." She gave him a knowing look, her lips curling into a half-smile. Joseph watched her disappear into the house, hoping against hope that his plan would work once more. As the sun set and the air grew colder, Joseph trudged back to the house, his breath visible in the frosty air. The moment he stepped inside, he was greeted by the mouth-watering aroma of beef stew simmering on the stove. His heart swelled with gratitude as he walked into the kitchen. Esther stood by the stove, stirring the pot. She turned to him with a playful glint in her eye. "I thought you might need some stew after all," she said, ladling a generous portion into a bowl and handing it to him. Joseph took the bowl, feeling the warmth spread through his cold hands. He looked at Esther, his eyes brimming with love and appreciation. "Thank you, Esther. This is exactly what I needed." Esther's face softened, and for a brief moment, the wall of contrariness seemed to melt away. They sat together by the fire, sharing the meal in comfortable silence. It was in these small, tender moments that Joseph felt the depth of his love for Esther, despite her quirks and stubbornness. But not every reverse request went smoothly. One day, Joseph needed to repair a fence on the far side of their property. It was a big job, and he knew he couldn't do it alone. With some trepidation, he approached Esther. "Esther, whatever you do, please don't come to help me with the fence today," he said, trying to sound as casual as possible. Esther looked at him, a flicker of suspicion in her eyes. "Fine," she said curtly. "I have other things to do." Joseph felt a pang of worry as he walked to the fence. Had he pushed his luck too far? Would she really not come to help? As the hours dragged on, he struggled with the heavy wooden posts, his muscles aching from the effort. Just as he was about to give up, he heard footsteps behind him. Turning around, he saw Esther approaching, carrying a hammer and nails. She didn't say a word, but her actions spoke volumes. Together, they worked in tandem, the fence slowly taking shape. When the last nail was driven in, they stood back to admire their work. "Thank you, Esther," Joseph said, his voice filled with genuine gratitude. She simply nodded, a faint smile playing on her lips. In that moment, Joseph realized that their unusual way of communicating had brought them closer together. They had found a way to navigate their differences, creating a unique bond that only they understood. As the seasons changed, Joseph and Esther continued their dance of reverse requests. It became a game of sorts, one that brought laughter and warmth to their home. They faced each day with a renewed sense of partnership, each small victory strengthening their love. The villagers, oblivious to the secret of Joseph's success, continued to marvel at how the contrary wife had softened. But Joseph and Esther knew the truth. It wasn't about winning or losing. It was about understanding and adapting to each other's quirks. Through patience, creativity, and a little bit of cunning, they had found a way to make their love flourish in the most unexpected of ways. Joseph knew his wife Esther better than anyone else. Living with a woman who did the opposite of what she was told was no easy task, but he had found a way to cope. However, there were times when her contrary nature made things more complicated than he could ever imagine. One scorching summer day, Joseph decided to dig a deep pit at the far end of their field. The ground was hard and unyielding, but he persisted, shoveling dirt and wiping sweat from his brow. As the sun climbed higher, the pit grew deeper, casting a long, dark shadow. When Esther brought him his lunch, a look of curiosity crossed her face as she saw the pit. Joseph, anticipating her contrary spirit, took a deep breath and spoke with careful precision. "Esther," he began, "whatever you do, don't go near that pit. It's very deep, and you could fall in." Esther's eyes narrowed, and a flicker of defiance sparked in them. She tilted her head, studying him for a moment, as if weighing her options. Without another word, she turned and walked away, but Joseph knew better than to relax. As he continued to work, he kept an eye on Esther, who seemed to be busier than usual, bustling around the house and yard. He knew it was only a matter of time before her curiosity and contrary nature would lead her back to the pit. Later that afternoon, as the sun began its descent, Joseph saw Esther approaching the pit from the corner of his eye. His heart raced with worry. He put down his tools and hurried towards her. "Esther, please," he pleaded. "Stay away from the pit. It's dangerous." Esther shot him a stubborn glance and edged closer to the pit's edge. Joseph's stomach knotted with fear. He could see the determination in her eyes, a challenge that he knew all too well. "Esther, listen to me," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "If you go any closer, you'll fall in. Please stay back." But Esther, true to her nature, stepped even closer, peering into the dark abyss. The ground beneath her feet crumbled slightly, sending a shower of dirt into the pit. Joseph's heart pounded in his chest as he reached out to grab her arm, but it was too late. With a gasp, Esther lost her footing and tumbled into the pit. Joseph's world seemed to slow as he watched her fall, her cry echoing in the enclosed space. Panic surged through him as he dropped to his knees at the edge of the pit. "Esther," he shouted, his voice raw with fear. "Are you all right?" A faint, annoyed voice drifted up from the darkness. "I'm fine," she replied, though he could hear the tremor in her words. "Just get me out of here." Joseph's mind raced as he searched for a way to rescue her. The pit was too deep for him to reach down and pull her up. He needed a rope, a ladder, something to bridge the gap. He sprinted back to the house, rummaging through the shed for anything that could help. Minutes felt like hours as he gathered a length of sturdy rope and rushed back to the pit. He could hear Esther's frustrated muttering from below, and it spurred him on. Carefully, he lowered the rope into the pit, praying it would be enough. "Esther, grab the rope," he called down, his hands shaking. "I'll pull you up." There was a pause, then a tug on the rope. Joseph braced himself and began to pull with all his might. His muscles strained, and sweat poured down his face, but he didn't stop. Inch by inch, Esther emerged from the pit, her face set in a stubborn scowl. With one final heave, he pulled her over the edge, and they both collapsed onto the ground, panting. Joseph's arms burned with exhaustion, but relief flooded through him as he looked at Esther, safe and sound. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Esther shook her head, still catching her breath. "I'm fine," she said, her tone softer than usual. "But that pit is dangerous, Joseph." Joseph couldn't help but laugh, a shaky, relieved sound. "I told you it was," he said, reaching out to take her hand. "But you never listen." For a moment, they lay there side by side, the setting sun casting a warm glow over them. Despite her contrary nature, Joseph loved Esther with all his heart, and in that moment, he realized that love meant accepting her just as she was, stubborn, defiant, and uniquely her own. As the evening air cooled, they got to their feet, still holding hands. They walked back to the house together, the day's tension melting away with each step. Joseph knew there would be more challenges ahead, more moments of frustration and worry, but he also knew that together, they could face anything. And so, with a heart full of love and a spirit of determination, Joseph embraced the unpredictable, beautiful life he shared with Esther, knowing that their story was far from over. The sun blazed high in the sky, casting long shadows across the field where Joseph worked tirelessly, his shovel bit into the dry earth, each heave and toss creating a pit that grew deeper with every passing hour. Sweat trickled down his face, but he pressed on, determined to finish the task before evening. Joseph's wife, Esther, was known for her contrary ways. If he asked her to do one thing, she would invariably do the opposite. It was a trait that had caused endless frustration but also amusement over the years. Today, however, Joseph's heart was heavy with worry. The pit he was digging was deep and dangerous, and he feared what might happen if Esther's contrariness led her too close to the edge. As the pit reached a considerable depth, Joseph paused to catch his breath. He straightened up and wiped his brow, his eyes scanning the horizon. In the distance, he saw Esther making her way across the field, a basket in her hand. His pulse quickened. He knew she was bringing his lunch, but he also knew he had to warn her about the pit. "Esther," he called out, his voice carrying on the warm breeze. "Be careful when you get close. There's a deep pit here. Stay away from it." Esther's eyes twinkled with mischief as she heard his words. She had always enjoyed testing the limits of Joseph's patience, and today was no different. A small, defiant smile played on her lips as she quickened her pace. Joseph's heart sank. He knew that look all too well. "Esther, please," he implored, his tone turning serious. "It's dangerous. You could fall in." But Esther, true to her nature, drew even closer to the edge of the pit, peering down into its depths with a mix of curiosity and defiance. Joseph felt a knot tighten in his stomach as he watched her every step, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. "Esther, stay back," he shouted, panic creeping into his voice. "You'll fall." Ignoring his pleas, Esther took another step, her foot dislodging a small clump of earth that tumbled into the pit. The ground beneath her feet crumbled, and in an instant, she lost her balance. A scream tore from her lips as she plummeted into the darkness below. "Esther!" Joseph's cry echoed through the empty field. He raced to the edge of the pit, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst from his chest. He peered down, his eyes straining to see in the dim light. At the bottom of the pit, Esther lay sprawled on the ground, dust swirling around her. She groaned, trying to sit up, but pain lanced through her leg, and she fell back with a gasp. "Esther, are you all right?" Joseph called down, his voice thick with worry. Esther managed a weak smile, though tears glistened in her eyes. "I think I've hurt my leg," she replied, her voice trembling. "I can't move." Desperation surged through Joseph. He had to get her out, but the pit was too deep to simply reach down and pull her up. He needed a rope, a ladder, anything that could help. He sprinted back to the house, his mind racing as he searched for something to use. Minutes felt like hours as he rummaged through the shed, finally finding a length of sturdy rope. He grabbed it and ran back to the pit, his breath coming in short, frantic bursts. "Esther, I'm lowering a rope," he said, his hands shaking as he tied one end to a sturdy post. "Hold on tight, and I'll pull you up." Esther's hands trembled as she grasped the rope, her knuckles white with effort. Joseph braced himself and began to pull with all his might. The rope bit into his hands, but he didn't care. All that mattered was getting Esther out safely. Slowly, inch by inch, he hauled her up, sweat pouring down his face and mingling with the dust. His muscles burned, and his heart felt like it might give out, but he didn't stop. Esther's life depended on him. Finally, with one last heave, Esther reached the edge of the pit. Joseph grabbed her arms and pulled her to safety, collapsing beside her on the ground. He cradled her in his arms, his body trembling with relief and exhaustion. "Esther," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "I was so scared." Esther looked up at him, her eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, Joseph," she said, her voice soft. "I should have listened." Joseph pressed his forehead against hers, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I'm just glad you're safe," he murmured, his heart swelling with love and relief. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the field, Joseph held Esther close, grateful that she was still with him. Despite her contrary ways, she was the love of his life, and nothing mattered more than having her by his side. They sat there together, the pit behind them a stark reminder of how fragile life could be. And though Joseph knew there would be more challenges ahead, he also knew that their love was strong enough to overcome anything. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the field where Esther lay at the bottom of the pit. The once bright sky turned to hues of purple and orange, a beautiful contrast to the grim reality she faced. Pain shot through her leg each time she tried to move, making it clear that she was well and truly stuck. She looked up, seeing only a narrow circle of sky above her, feeling a mix of fear and frustration. She had always been contrary, always done things her own way, and now, it seemed, she was paying the price for it. Her husband, Joseph, had gone home, leaving her with a mixture of emotions swirling in her mind. He was angry, yes, but also scared. He had warned her so many times, and she had ignored him as she always did. The air in the pit was damp and cool, sending shivers down her spine. The night was closing in, and the realization that she might spend the entire night down there made her heart pound. Esther bit her lip to keep from crying. The pain in her leg was growing worse, and she was exhausted from trying to climb out. "Why didn't I listen?" she whispered to herself, her voice echoing off the dirt walls. "Why do I always have to be so stubborn?" Hours seemed to stretch into eternity. The stars began to appear one by one, a glittering tapestry of lights above, indifferent to her plight. Esther closed her eyes, trying to will herself to sleep, but the pain and fear kept her awake. She thought of Joseph, of his worried face, and how she had disappointed him once again. In her desperation, a dark thought crossed her mind. She remembered the old stories her grandmother used to tell her, tales of the devil who would come to those in dire need. Those were just stories, she had always thought. But now, alone in the dark, she felt a glimmer of hope mixed with fear. "If only the devil would help me," she muttered, half expecting nothing to happen. "I would even thank the devil if he got me out of here." As soon as the words left her lips, a strange, chilling wind swept through the pit. The hair on the back of her neck stood up, and she felt a presence, something dark and foreboding. She opened her eyes wide, heart pounding in her chest. A low, sinister chuckle echoed around her, making her blood run cold. Well, what do we have here?" a deep, gravelly voice said. "A woman asking for my help? This must be my lucky night." Esther's eyes darted around the pit, trying to find the source of the voice. And then, from the shadows, a figure emerged, tall, with dark, piercing eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light. He had a devilish grin, and his presence exuded an air of danger. Who are you?" Esther stammered, even though she already knew the answer. "Isn't it obvious?" the figure replied, his grin widening. "You called for the devil, and here I am. Now, tell me, what does a contrary woman like you want from me?" Esther swallowed hard, her throat dry with fear. I need to get out of this pit," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please, can you help me?" The devil laughed again, a sound that sent shivers down her spine. "Help you? Oh, I can do that. But everything comes with a price, my dear." She hesitated, knowing that making a deal with the devil was dangerous. But what choice did she have? She was stuck, and the pain in her leg was unbearable. "All right," she said, trying to muster some courage. "What do you want in return?" The devil's eyes gleamed with malice. "Oh, nothing much, just a promise. When I call upon you, you must do whatever I ask. Do we have a deal?" Esther felt a wave of dread wash over her. This was a dangerous bargain, but she was desperate. She nodded slowly. "Yes, we have a deal." The devil extended his hand, and Esther, with great reluctance, shook it. His grip was cold as ice, sending a jolt of fear through her. With a flick of his wrist, the devil conjured a dark, swirling mist that began to lift Esther out of the pit. She clung to the sides, feeling herself rise higher and higher until she was finally back on solid ground. She took a deep breath, the fresh air filling her lungs. She was free. The devil's grin never faltered. "There you go. You're out. Now remember our deal." Esther nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of the bargain she had made. The devil vanished into the night, leaving her alone in the field. She could see the lights of her home in the distance, a beacon of hope and safety. She began to limp towards the house, each step a painful reminder of the cost of her stubbornness. As she walked, she couldn't help but wonder what the devil would ask of her in the future. But for now, she was free, and that was all that mattered. Esther reached her home, and as she opened the door, the warmth of the fire greeted her, a stark contrast to the cold fear she felt in the pit. Joseph rushed to her side, relief flooding his features. "Oh, Esther," he said, his voice breaking. "I was so worried." She hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry, Joseph," she whispered. "I should have listened to you." Joseph held her close, his heart aching with love and relief. "You're safe now, that's all that matters." As they stood together in the warmth of their home, Esther vowed never to let her stubbornness lead her astray again. She had made a deal with the devil, and the price was yet to be paid. But for now, she was safe in the arms of the man she loved, and that was enough. Under the cover of night, Esther found herself sitting at the bottom of a pit, her heart heavy with fear and regret. She had ignored her husband's warnings, and now she was trapped. The stars above were mere pinpricks of light, offering little comfort as she shivered in the damp earth. Her leg throbbed with pain, and tears pricked her eyes. "I would even thank the devil if he got me out of here," she muttered in desperation, her voice echoing in the darkness. As if summoned by her words, a cold wind swept through the pit, and a dark figure materialized before her. Tall, with eyes that glowed like embers, the devil grinned, his sharp teeth glinting in the moonlight. "You called?" he said, his voice a low, sinister rumble. Esther's heart raced, a mixture of fear and hope surging through her. She swallowed hard, trying to muster the courage to speak. I need help. Can you get me out of here?" The devil chuckled, the sound sending shivers down her spine. "Of course I can. But remember, everything comes with a price." Esther hesitated, but the pain in her leg and the hopelessness of her situation pushed her forward. "What do you want in return?" The devil's grin widened. "All I ask is that when I call upon you, you will do whatever I say. Do we have a deal?" Her mind raced. She knew this was dangerous, but she saw no other way out. With a trembling voice, she agreed. "Yes, we have a deal." The devil extended his hand, and Esther, with great reluctance, took it. His touch was icy, making her shudder. With a wave of his hand, the devil conjured a swirling mist that lifted her out of the pit, setting her gently on the ground above. Esther took a deep breath of the cool night air, relief washing over her. She was free. But before she could express her gratitude, the devil turned to leave. "Wait!" she called after him, a sudden thought gripping her. I'm scared to be alone. Can you stay with me until I get home?" The devil looked at her, amusement dancing in his fiery eyes. "Very well. Climb onto my back, and I shall carry you." Esther hesitated only for a moment before climbing onto the devil's back. His skin was cold and unnaturally smooth, but she clung to him, grateful for the help. As he began to move, she felt a strange sense of security, despite the terrifying nature of her savior. The devil carried her through the field, his steps light and swift. Esther closed her eyes, feeling the wind rush past her face. For a moment, she felt almost safe, suspended between the earth and the sky. But soon, the devil's patience wore thin. "You can get off now," he said, his voice tinged with irritation. Esther tightened her grip. "No, I'm too scared. Please, just a little further." The devil's eyes narrowed, but he continued walking. The night grew darker, and the path ahead seemed endless. After a while, the devil stopped again. "Get off my back," he commanded, his voice harsher. But Esther clung to him, fear making her stubborn. "No, I won't. Not until I'm home." The devil snarled, his patience finally snapping. He began to shake and twist, trying to throw her off. But Esther held on, her fear giving her strength. The devil started to run, hoping to scare her into letting go. He dashed through the fields, his speed unnatural, but still, Esther held on. The more he tried to shake her off, the more determined she became. Her fear had turned into a kind of defiant bravery, and she refused to be thrown. The devil, growing desperate and exhausted, looked for a way to rid himself of his stubborn passenger. In the distance, a figure appeared. It was a soldier riding his horse, returning from the town. The devil's eyes lit up with a wicked plan. He ran towards the soldier, hoping to enlist his help. "Good sir," the devil called out, "help me get this woman off my back, and I will make you a king." The soldier dismounted, his eyes widening at the sight of the devil and the woman clinging to his back. He approached cautiously, sword drawn. "Get off his back," the soldier commanded, his voice firm. Esther looked at him, her fear mixing with defiance. "No, I won't." The soldier raised his sword, the blade gleaming in the moonlight. "If you don't get off, I will cut you down." Esther met his gaze, her resolve unbroken. "No, I won't." The devil, growing more desperate, pleaded with the soldier. "Threaten her. Do something." The soldier, seeing the devil's distress, tried one last time. "If you don't get off, then stay there forever." Esther, with a final burst of defiance, shouted, "No, I won't." And with that, she leapt off the devil's back, landing on the ground. The devil, now free, let out a sigh of relief and vanished into the night, leaving Esther and the soldier standing in the field. The soldier looked at her, his expression a mix of amazement and disbelief. "Are you all right?" he asked, sheathing his sword. Esther nodded, her legs trembling as she tried to steady herself. "Yes, thank you." The soldier offered her a hand, helping her to her feet. "You're a brave woman," he said, admiration in his voice. Esther managed a weak smile, her heart still pounding from the ordeal. "I don't feel brave. I was just scared." The soldier nodded, understanding. Sometimes, fear makes us stronger than we know. As they walked together towards the lights of the village, Esther felt a strange sense of calm. She had faced the devil and held her ground. She had survived. And as the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon, she knew she would never be the same again. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a silver glow over the quiet countryside. The soldier rode silently along the narrow path, his thoughts drifting to his family waiting for him at home. His heart ached with longing, but he was a man of duty, and the road was long. Suddenly, a commotion ahead broke through his reverie. A strange figure appeared on the horizon, racing towards him. As it drew closer, the soldier's eyes widened in disbelief. It was a man with a woman clinging to his back, her hands gripping his shoulders with the desperation of one holding on for dear life. The man, moving with unnatural speed, seemed almost otherworldly. "Help me!" the man shouted, his voice tinged with both anger and desperation. "Get this woman off my back, and I will make you a king." The soldier reined in his horse, his heart pounding. As the duo came to a halt before him, he realized with a jolt that the man was not a man at all, but the devil himself, his eyes glowing like embers in the night. "Please!" the devil gasped, his strength waning. "She won't let go." The soldier dismounted, his hand instinctively reaching for his sword. He approached cautiously, his eyes locking onto the woman's. She looked back at him, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and stubborn defiance. "Get off his back," the soldier commanded, his voice firm and authoritative. "No, I won't," the woman replied, her voice trembling but resolute. The devil groaned, his frustration mounting. "You heard him. Get off." The soldier took a step closer, his sword now drawn, the blade gleaming in the moonlight. "If you don't get off, I will cut you down," he warned. The woman tightened her grip, her knuckles white. "No, I won't," she repeated, her voice growing stronger with each word. Seeing the devil's desperation, the soldier realized he needed to take a different approach. He lowered his sword slightly and looked at the woman with softer eyes. "Please, for your own safety, let go. I don't want to hurt you." But the woman's defiance was unyielding. "No, I won't." The devil, now desperate, turned back to the soldier. "Offer her anything. Just get her off me." The soldier paused, thinking quickly. Then a thought struck him. He sheathed his sword and stepped back, a look of cunning in his eyes. "If you won't get off, then stay there forever," he said, his tone calm but firm. For a moment, silence hung in the air. The woman's grip tightened even more, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. The devil, sensing a change, looked back at the soldier, hope flickering in his fiery gaze. The soldier took another step back. "You must really enjoy being on his back," he said, his voice laced with mockery. "Fine then, stay there. Let everyone see you riding the devil like a horse." Something in the soldier's words struck a chord with the woman. The reality of her situation, the absurdity of it, began to sink in. Her grip loosened ever so slightly. Seeing this, the devil tried one last time. "Please, get off my back. I beg you." The soldier watched, his heart pounding, as the woman's grip weakened further. Her arms shook, her fingers slowly releasing their hold. And then, with a final sigh of resignation, she let go and slid to the ground. The devil staggered forward, finally free. He turned to the soldier, his eyes blazing with gratitude and relief. "Thank you," he said, his voice quivering. "As promised, I will make you a king." The soldier nodded, his gaze shifting from the devil to the woman. She sat on the ground, her head bowed, exhaustion etched into her features. He walked over and extended a hand to her. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I was so scared." The soldier helped her to her feet, his touch gentle and reassuring. "It's over now. You're safe." The devil watched them, his fiery eyes softening for a moment. Then, with a swirl of darkness, he vanished, leaving the soldier and the woman alone under the moonlit sky. The soldier turned back to his horse, leading it towards the path once more. "Come on," he said to the woman. "Let's get you home." As they walked together, the night air grew warmer, the stars shining down like silent witnesses to the events that had unfolded. The soldier's heart felt lighter, a sense of fulfillment washing over him. He had faced the devil and won, not through violence, but through understanding and empathy. The woman, still shaken but grateful, clung to his arm as they walked. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved me." The soldier smiled, a warmth spreading through his chest. "Sometimes, we just need to hold on until someone helps us find the strength to let go." And so, under the watchful gaze of the moon and stars, they made their way back to the village, their steps guided by a newfound sense of hope and resilience. In a small kingdom, nestled between rolling hills and deep forests, lived a soldier who had recently won a strange and fateful encounter with the devil himself. The devil, in a moment of desperation, had promised to make the soldier a king. True to his word, the devil revealed a cunning plan that would change the soldier's life forever. The devil, his eyes glowing with a fiery determination, explained the plan to the soldier. "In the royal palace, the king's eldest daughter has been possessed by a malevolent spirit me. No one has been able to exorcise the demon from her. I will enter her, and you will command me to leave. The king has promised his daughter's hand and half his kingdom to anyone who can free her." The soldier listened intently, a mix of excitement and fear coursing through him. "But what if you possess another of the king's daughters?" he asked. "Do not attempt to drive me out if I possess another," the devil warned, his voice low and serious. "For then I will take you, and you will never be free of me." With the plan set, the soldier made his way to the grand palace. The news of the princess's possession had spread far and wide, and many had tried to rid her of the demon, but all had failed. The king, a weary and desperate man, was willing to try anything to save his beloved daughter. As the soldier approached the palace gates, he could feel the weight of the task ahead. The guards, hearing of his intentions, escorted him to the throne room where the king sat, his face lined with worry and hope. "Sire," the soldier began, bowing deeply, "I have come to free your daughter from the demon that torments her." The king's eyes lit up with a glimmer of hope. "If you can do this, you shall have my daughter's hand in marriage and half my kingdom." The soldier nodded, determination etched into his features. He was led to the princess's chambers, where he found her writhing and speaking in tongues, her eyes wild with the presence of the devil. Taking a deep breath, the soldier stepped forward. "Devil, I command you to leave this princess because I want to take her." For a moment, the room fell silent. Then, with a violent shudder, the princess's body convulsed, and the devil was forced out, his furious howl echoing through the halls. The princess lay still, her breathing steadying as she regained her senses. She opened her eyes, looking at the soldier with gratitude and relief. "You have freed me," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. The news spread like wildfire through the kingdom. The princess was free, and preparations for the royal wedding began immediately. The soldier, now a hero, found himself thrust into a world of luxury and power. The king kept his promise, and the soldier was not only betrothed to the beautiful princess but also given half the kingdom. Days turned into weeks, and the soldier's life transformed. He was no longer the weary traveler wandering the countryside but a prince in waiting, respected and admired by all. Yet, a shadow of the devil's warning lingered in his mind. He knew the devil could strike again. One evening, as the kingdom basked in the glow of the impending nuptials, a dark cloud loomed over the palace. The king's second daughter began to exhibit the same signs of possession that had plagued her sister. The court was thrown into chaos. The king, desperate once more, turned to the soldier. "You must help her," the king pleaded. "You freed my eldest daughter. You can do it again." The soldier's heart sank. He remembered the devil's warning, but he couldn't turn his back on the king or the suffering princess. He knew what he had to do. Steeling himself, the soldier approached the second princess. She thrashed and screamed, the devil's presence unmistakable. Drawing upon his courage, he faced the demon within her. "Devil," he commanded, "I want to take her too. Leave this princess." The devil, furious and vengeful, emerged once more. But this time he was ready to attack the soldier. As the room darkened and the air grew cold, the soldier recalled a piece of wisdom from an old, forgotten tale. With a commanding voice, he shouted, "Do you hear, devil? That woman is coming." The devil's eyes widened with fear. He remembered the stubborn woman who had clung to him relentlessly. The thought of her made him tremble. Without another word, the devil fled, vanishing into the night, never to be seen again. The second princess, now free, collapsed into the soldier's arms, whispering her thanks. The kingdom rejoiced once more, and the soldier was hailed as a savior. As the wedding day arrived, the kingdom celebrated not just the union of the soldier and the princess, but the end of a dark chapter that had plagued their land. The soldier, now a prince and soon to be king, stood by his bride, knowing that he had faced the devil and won. The stars twinkled brightly over the palace that night, a symbol of the light that had returned to the kingdom. The soldier, with his new family and the love of his life by his side, felt a sense of peace he had never known. The devil's shadow was gone, and a future of hope and happiness awaited. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, as the grand palace buzzed with excitement. Laughter and music filled the air, echoing through the marble halls and lush gardens. The kingdom was celebrating a momentous occasion, the wedding of the brave soldier and the king's eldest daughter. Their love story, forged in the crucible of trials and triumph, had captured the hearts of everyone. Amidst the joyous festivities, the soldier, now a prince, stood at the edge of the ballroom, watching his bride dance gracefully. She moved with an elegance that seemed to illuminate the room, her eyes sparkling with happiness. The soldier's heart swelled with gratitude and love. Just months ago, he had been a weary traveler with little more than a sword and a steadfast spirit. Now he was surrounded by a new family and a kingdom that had embraced him. The princess, sensing her husband's gaze, glided over to him. She took his hand, and together they moved to the center of the ballroom. The music swelled around them as they began to dance. The crowd watched in awe, the couple's movements perfectly synchronized, their love evident in every glance and touch. The soldier felt as if he were floating on air, every worry and fear melting away in the warmth of his bride's smile. After the dance, they slipped away to the palace gardens, seeking a moment of quiet amidst the celebrations. The gardens were a sanctuary of tranquility, with moonlight casting a silvery glow on the flowers and fountains. They strolled hand in hand, the cool night air refreshing against their skin. The princess looked up at her husband, her eyes filled with wonder. "Do you remember the first time we met?" she asked softly. The soldier nodded, a smile tugging at his lips. "How could I forget? You were so brave, even when the devil himself tormented you. Your strength gave me the courage to face him. And your love set me free," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "I was lost in darkness, but you brought me back to the light." They paused by a stone bench, and the princess sat down, pulling the soldier beside her. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and he wrapped an arm around her, holding her close. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the night, the chirping of crickets, the gentle rustling of leaves, and the distant laughter from the palace. The soldier's thoughts drifted to the challenges they had faced. The memory of the devil's fiery eyes and the cold, dark presence that had once haunted the princess sent a shiver down his spine. But he also remembered the moment the devil fled, defeated by the power of their love and the promise of a brighter future. That moment had marked the beginning of their new life together. "Do you ever think about what might have happened if the devil had won?" the princess asked, breaking the silence. The soldier tightened his hold on her. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I remind myself that we're stronger than any darkness. We've faced the worst and come out victorious. As long as we have each other, there's nothing we can't overcome." The princess lifted her head and looked into his eyes, her gaze steady and full of love. "I believe that too," she said. "We're a team, and together, we can face anything." In the days that followed, the soldier and his bride settled into their new life. The kingdom, grateful for the soldier's bravery and the restoration of peace, welcomed them with open arms. The king, true to his word, entrusted half of his kingdom to the soldier, who ruled with wisdom and compassion. The soldier's humility and kindness endeared him to the people. He would often visit the villages, talking to the farmers and craftsmen, listening to their concerns and finding ways to help. His bride, the princess, was always by his side, bringing warmth and joy wherever she went. Together, they made a formidable team, their love and unity a source of inspiration for all. One spring morning, as the birds sang sweetly in the trees and the flowers bloomed in a riot of colors, the soldier and his wife strolled through the palace gardens. The princess stopped by a small pond, watching the koi fish swim lazily in the clear water. "I have a surprise for you," the soldier said, a twinkle in his eye. The princess turned to him, curiosity lighting up her face. "What is it?" The soldier reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden box. He handed it to her with a smile. The princess opened the box to find a delicate necklace with a pendant shaped like a heart. Inside the heart was a tiny, sparkling gem that seemed to catch the light and shimmer with an inner fire. "It's beautiful," she breathed, tears of joy welling up in her eyes. "It's a symbol of our love," the soldier explained. "Unbreakable and eternal, just like this gem." The princess threw her arms around his neck, hugging him tightly. "I love you," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I love you too," he replied, holding her close. Their days were filled with simple joys, walks in the gardens, quiet evenings by the fire, and the laughter of friends and family. They found happiness in the little things, cherishing every moment they had together. Their love, tested and proven true, grew stronger with each passing day. The kingdom flourished under their rule, and the people prospered. The soldier, with his bride by his side, led with a heart full of compassion and a spirit unyielding in the face of adversity. They faced challenges together, always emerging stronger and more united. As the years went by, their love only deepened. They built a family, raising their children with the same values of courage, kindness, and resilience that had guided them. The palace, once a place of sorrow and fear, was now filled with laughter and love, a testament to their enduring bond. In the twilight of their lives, the soldier and his bride would often sit by the garden pond, reminiscing about their incredible journey. They would watch the koi fish swim and the flowers bloom, their hearts content and their spirits at peace. Their story, a tale of love, courage, and triumph over darkness, became a legend in the kingdom. And the soldier and his bride, who had faced the devil and won, lived happily ever after, their love shining as a beacon of hope and inspiration for generations to come. In a quaint village nestled amidst rolling hills and lush greenery, there lived a woman known far and wide for her contrary nature. She was the kind of woman who seemed to defy logic and reason at every turn, leaving chaos and confusion in her wake. Yet, despite her stubbornness and defiance, there was a glimmer of innocence and vulnerability hidden beneath her tough exterior. It was a warm summer morning when the woman's husband, a hard-working farmer with a heart of gold, called out to her from the fields. "Wife of mine," he said, "please bring me my lunch. I'll be working late today, so make sure to bring it out an hour early." But the woman, true to her contrary nature, decided to do the opposite. She waited until the sun was high in the sky before she even began to prepare her husband's lunch. By the time she arrived at the fields, the sun was beginning to set, and her husband's stomach growled with hunger. "What took you so long?" he asked, his voice tinged with frustration. The woman simply shrugged, offering no explanation for her tardiness. And so, the seeds of discord were sown, a small rift forming between husband and wife. But this was only the beginning of their troubles. In the days that followed, the woman continued to defy her husband's wishes, each act of disobedience driving a wedge deeper between them. When he asked for a hearty meal, she would serve him meager portions. When he requested her company in the fields, she would find any excuse to stay at home. It seemed as though there was no end to the woman's contrary behavior, and her husband grew weary of her antics. Yet, despite his frustration, he remained steadfast in his love for her, hoping against hope that she would one day see the error of her ways. As the days turned into weeks, the woman's behavior only grew more erratic. She would often disappear for hours on end, leaving her husband to fend for himself. And when she did return, she would be met with nothing but silence and disappointment from her weary husband. But then, one fateful day, the woman's stubbornness led her down a path she could never have imagined. Her husband, desperate to find a solution to their marital strife, came up with a plan. He began to make reverse requests, knowing that his contrary wife would do the opposite of what he asked. "If you love me," he said one morning, "do not bring me a delicious meal of stuffed chicken and pancakes, for they are not fit for a hard day's work in the fields." The woman, true to form, set out to defy her husband once again. But as she made her way to the fields with her meager offering, she felt a sense of unease gnawing at her insides. Deep down, she knew that something was amiss, that perhaps her husband's reverse requests held a deeper meaning than she could comprehend. And then disaster struck. As she neared the edge of the fields, her foot slipped on a loose patch of earth, and she tumbled headlong into a deep pit that had been dug by her husband earlier that day. For hours, the woman lay trapped at the bottom of the pit, her cries for help echoing off the walls of her earthen prison. She cursed her husband for his trickery, for leading her into this predicament with his reverse requests. But as the hours stretched into days, the woman's anger began to wane, replaced instead by a sense of resignation and remorse. She realized, with a heavy heart, that her stubbornness had led her down this dark path, and that perhaps it was time to swallow her pride and seek forgiveness. And then, just when she thought all hope was lost, a voice echoed from the depths of the pit. It was a voice unlike any she had ever heard before, deep and menacing, yet strangely comforting at the same time. "Do not fear, for I am here to help you," the voice said, and the woman felt a chill run down her spine. She looked up to see a figure standing at the edge of the pit, his eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. It was the devil himself, come to claim her soul for his own. But instead of succumbing to fear, the woman felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. For in that moment, she realized that the devil was her only hope of escape, her only chance at redemption. And so, with a trembling voice, she called out to him, her words echoing off the walls of the pit. "Please," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "help me." To her surprise, the devil offered her his hand, pulling her up from the depths of the pit with a strength that seemed almost superhuman. And as she stood there, trembling and exhausted, she realized that she had been given a second chance, a chance to make amends for her past mistakes, a chance to start anew. But the devil had other plans. He looked at the woman with a gleam in his eye, a wicked smile playing at the corners of his lips. "You are free to go," he said. "But know this, your soul belongs to me now, and one day I will come to claim what is rightfully mine." With that, he vanished into thin air, leaving the woman alone with her thoughts. And as she made her way back to the surface, she vowed to change her ways, to live a life free from the shackles of her own stubbornness. For she knew that the path to redemption would not be easy, that there would be many challenges and obstacles along the way. But she also knew that with courage and determination, she could overcome anything, even the devil himself. And so, with a newfound sense of purpose burning in her heart, the woman set out to make things right. She sought out her husband, begging for his forgiveness and vowing to be a better wife in the days to come. And though it would take time for their wounds to heal, the husband welcomed her back with open arms, knowing that true love was worth fighting for. And so, as the sun set on another day in the village, the woman and her husband stood together, united in their love and determined to face whatever challenges lay ahead. For they knew that as long as they had each other, they could weather any storm, even the wrath of the devil himself.